Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the sudden news yesterday that Boris Johnson is backing down over the Brexit immigration nonsense and allowing the issuing of visas to allow foreign lorry drivers into the country. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, this was most unexpected. Completely knackered my scheduling. Thanks very much. But it's a bit like the delay to EU import checks again, isn't it? The government simply cannot handle the consequences of their extreme Tory Brexit. We can't apply checks on EU imports because we can't physically manage it in a way that still allows imports to get through in sufficient quantities. And we are desperate for those imports. We cannot do without them. Same applies to lorry drivers. There are still other shortages caused by our brainless Brexit immigration rules, but the lorry driver shortage just has so many knock-on effects. It just either creates crises or makes them worse. People were increasingly talking about an upcoming winter of discontent, referencing the winter that knackered the Labour government in the late 70s and ushered in Margaret Thatcher to wreak havoc on the country. We need visas for foreign lorry drivers. That's what the haulage industry kept saying. No, said the government. Then supermarkets started having problems. McDonald's ran out of milkshakes, Nando's ran out of chicken for goodness sake, and the whole thing had just carried on snowballing. People have followed inside the industry said that the government would just have to relent at some point. Said it can't carry on like this. These lunatics in government are a stubborn lot. Then the Financial Times reported yesterday that the Prime Minister has lost patience with all the bad headlines. Take note of that. He hasn't lost patience with the shortages. He hasn't lost patience with the problems that this is causing people. No, he's lost patience with the headlines that have stopped saying how great he is. Well, this is a disaster for his ego, and immediate action was required. It's reported that someone close to Johnson said he doesn't care about visa limits anymore. Being honest, it's doubtful he ever did. You know, this was Priti Patel's brand of lunacy, really. We must remember that Boris Johnson has no firm political beliefs at all. His core aim is for as many people as possible to say how great he is. That's it. He's the archetypal perfect fascist as described in Orwell's 1984. Power for the sake of power. No getting tripped up by trying to actually achieve anything. That just leads to disaster. It's just all about the power. And you will switch your position on any given policy in order to secure that power, just for another day. And just as if we'd applied those import checks next week, if this lorry driver shortage wasn't dealt with, the government would have had to face up to public outrage at some point. Everyone has their tipping point. The media can no longer hide the shambles. You know, they wanted Brexit, but they didn't want this Brexit. The straw that broke the camel's back appears to have been panic buying at petrol stations. You know, just a hint that fuel shortages might become more widespread, and people just lost it. I mean, they just lost it. I've got to get out and get fuel. This was another issue put squarely at the feet of a lack of lorry drivers. Wages have been going up for HGV drivers, but all it's done is move drivers around. Hasn't really conjured up new ones. Nothing to compensate for our severe shortages anyway. The Transport Secretary was yesterday morning trying to claim that Brexit allowed him to tamper with HGV tests. Yeah, but not only has that not yielded a single extra driver yet, and the crisis is now, not in the future, but when it does, they'll be less skilled than is currently the case. If they wanted to put something in place to deal with this crisis, they should have done it years ago when they knew it was going to happen. Making the tests easier is not how to do it either. That doesn't help us. It just creates more pile-ups on the motorway. How does killing more lorry drivers help us? He was also banging on about the army helping again. They're going to be a bit busy, aren't they? Weren't they supposed to be driving groceries around by now? What happened to that idea? If we didn't have the soldiers to help out with food distribution, what made Shaps think we had the soldiers to drive fuel around? At least in the quantities needed to avert the crisis. So it's all a mess, and Priti Patel has now been reported to have dropped her objections, and her objections were pretty strong. She's going to have to rule that more foreigners can come into the country. I'm sure she'll be delighted at that. Now, she'll no doubt take her anger out on some more innocents. So Brexit fails to survive another crash into the wall of reality. But that doesn't mean disaster averted. See, there are still a few things to be noted. One, this wouldn't mean we can suddenly get all those EU lorry drivers back. It's still it's not just that we didn't allow them back. It's a hassle for them to drive in Britain. Even if they had the visa, they have an easier time bobbing around other EU countries, and there's plenty of work for them there. So this means we'd need to attract drivers from further away, Asia say. But at least that should be possible now. The haulage industry believes it can source drivers. They just need the visas. Well, they should get the visas now. Secondly, this decision doesn't solve the problem overnight. As I was alluding to in the earlier video today, we're already a long way behind on preparations for Johnson's precious Christmas. And that demand is only going to get higher right now. In fact, if Patel is still stubborn enough to, let's say she's been a bit petulant, she goes, okay, you can have some more visas, but she caps the too low a value, it could still end up with way too few drivers to meet this extra demand. And even if there is no cap, or it's a sensible cap, how long will it take to normalise? Like I say, we're rushing towards much higher economic activity. That means more demand for goods being passed around. Like running a YouTube channel, it actually gives you an interesting, albeit crude, way of judging the fluctuations in the economy. Because the cost per mile I get, which is basically how much I get per 1,000 ad views, is variable throughout the year, and it follows a pattern, a definite pattern. But it's not entirely random. Like in the last third of a year, and I've been doing this, not on this channel, but on a couple of channels for some years now, I can see the pattern. Last third of the year, the rate increases. You know, it gets to frenzy at Christmas and then it drops off again. You get a massive chunk of your annual revenue in the months leading up to Christmas, because that you get about half your annual salary there. Not that it's a salary, income. Because that's when advertisers are blowing their annual budgets. Then after Christmas in January, it drops off a cliff. If anyone's thinking of getting into YouTube and it's not topical like this, it's stuff you plan well in advance, never waste your A-grade material in January. Save it for November. Well, I can see from my cost per mile that the rate has suddenly gone up in the last week. About a week later than it did last year. That means businesses are gearing up, and that means there's going to be more demand for distribution. We are so short of lorry drivers, we can see shortages all around us. And this wasn't even coinciding with the busy part of the year. That's just getting started. And it doesn't jump up, it ramps up. Economic activity increases in September at some point, right about halfway through September, it sort of starts going up. Then it goes up further in October, more in November, building up to a fever pitch in December. And you can see the pattern here on a little graph I did of my cost per mile from last year and this year so far. So if businesses are spending more on advertising, it's because they expect to sell more. If they expect to sell more, they're going to need more stock bringing in and distributing around to their stores. That means a higher demand for lorry drivers. Only we can't meet the demand. You know, when we had that dip, which you can see that was summer, we couldn't meet the demand then. Then the third thing to consider is there are some shortages that are born of other Brexit problems. All of them are made worse with the shortage of lorry drivers and therefore technically will ease without it, but we still have shortages in food production. We still have problems getting carbon dioxide. So it's not like the disaster has been averted. Or maybe it has. I suppose Johnson calibrates disaster according to the political damage to him personally. Maybe this will be enough to prevent him, screwing things up so badly that the public gets sick of him. Apparently one of Patel's objections is that the other sectors would demand more visas to help with recruitment issues for them. And I can be quite sure that lobbying for just this will intensify. But my response to that would be that if the government genuinely believes that we have the domestic workforce, because that's what they keep saying, just invest in the domestic workforce. Okay, so you're saying we've got the domestic workforce to do these jobs right now, not in a couple of years with some plan in place, right now, point them out. If you think we've got the domestic workforce to get our crops picked, meat processed, food in general packaged and stored, why don't you show businesses where they are? They didn't want to lose all this money. Why didn't you tell them where these workers are? Link up the workers with the jobs. After all, the government is the one who thinks we have the capacity. They reckon they know where these workers are. So why not help out? Take the lead here. Because we also need to consider that while there are shortages existing in other sectors, it will be more difficult to entice people to take up a career as a lorry driver. It's crap. Even if it was paid well, it's still crap. There are people who will take lower pay for a better work-life balance. If you have better employment alternatives elsewhere, you will not entice new HGV drivers in anything like the numbers needed. But anyway, it's another surrender for Brexit. Looking forward to the next. Until then, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.